Hello and welcome back to Round the Table, slow TV radio from the meeting point, broadcasting not only to Bilbao but throughout the world. Hello and welcome to Round the Table, episode 77. And this week we are talking about myths and mysteries. And we've got all our usual things in this program today, as well as a wonderful story, a Christmas story, a true Christmas story, in fact. But first, I've got a little vocabulary for you, not on the subject of the week, but because I've got a cold. So I thought I would share some of my vocabulary of having a cold with you. So, I have a cold, but I don't have the flu, because the flu is much more serious. I've had a cough, and I have a sore throat. Maybe you can hear from my voice that I have a sore throat. But I haven't lost my voice, not completely. I haven't lost my voice. But I have been sneezing and sniffing a lot. And I've had to blow my nose a lot because I've had a runny nose when lots of liquid comes out of your nose. But now it's more like a blocked nose where I cannot breathe through my nose. It is blocked. And don't forget, in these circumstances, we don't use the word constipated. In English, constipated means something else. It means you can't go to the toilet. So if you have a blocked nose and you go to the pharmacy and you say, "Can you give me something for my constipation?" you might be in for a little surprise on the way home. So be careful with that one. Now, here are some of the phrases from this week's conversation all about myths and mysteries. Lost in the mists of time. That's a very interesting phrase. Lost in the mists of time. The mist, of course, is like a fog. And if you imagine something that happened so long ago, it's rather obscure and difficult to see what the actual truth was. So we can say it's lost in the mists of time. In mysterious circumstances. A little collocation there when we were discussing disappearances of ships in the Bermuda Triangle. They disappear in mysterious circumstances. Your mind is playing tricks on you. Maybe because it is dark, or you are tired, or you are half asleep maybe. Sometimes you see something in the shadows and you imagine it to be something a bit more frightening than it really is. We might say, your mind is playing tricks on you. Wishful thinking. When you want something to be true, it's only wishful thinking. Like people believing in supernatural things, or life after death seems to be a common thing amongst most cultures, that we go somewhere after we die. Of course, there's no proof, but people like it to be true, so we might say it's just wishful thinking. A drawn-out story, from the phrasal verb to draw out, meaning to extend. So a drawn-out story, or a long drawn-out story, is one that is much longer than it really needs to be. You can also use a phrasal verb drag out to extend something as well, beyond what is necessary. So a drawn-out story. This draw, of course, means pull. The verb to draw means pull, and that is why we use it when you make pictures with a pencil, because you pull the pencil across the page. So draw means pull, don't forget that. Scraping the bottom of the barrel is the next one. Imagine a barrel full of ideas, metaphorical ideas in a barrel. And as you use them all up and you get to the bottom of the barrel, you have to scrape the bottom to see if there are any ideas remaining. So this is a very useful phrase when you're describing something like a TV series and you find the first 3 or 4 seasons might be quite good, but by season 5 or 6, they've run out of good ideas and it's not as good as it used to be. So you can say they're scraping the bottom of the barrel. I can't get my head around it. I can't get my head around it means it's impossible for me to understand. It's too complex. And another one, mind-boggling. The mind boggles, some people say. So if something is mind-boggling, it's very confusing. That's what it means. And finally, a freak wave. Back to the Bermuda Triangle again. Why do those ships sink? It might just be a freak wave. One that is very unexpected and doesn't follow any normal pattern would be a freak wave. Now, where's that pronunciation for this week? This week's pronunciation is one that we've seen several times before. It's this j sound. J. Not a y sound. The y is more like a vowel and the j is more like a consonant. It's related to the ch, as in chocolate and choco, but it's more voiced. It's down in your throat. It's a j. So listen to these words. Manager, manager, j, 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 manager. Project, project, project. Major, major, j, 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 major. Legend, legend. Magician. This one's got a j and a sh in it. Magician, magician. You see the first A is very contracted as well. It's got m, jish, n, magician. Joking, joking. Don't forget, joke is not the same as choke or yoke. There are 3 words that go together. This word is joking, joking with a j at the beginning. And giant, giant. So that's your pronunciation for this week. Now, who's this I see on the horizon?
Hello again to all my friends at the meeting point over there in Bilbao. It's so good to be invited back, after what seems like an eternity, to deliver this week's monologue on the subject of myth and mystery. Myth and mystery have always played a central role in human culture. From ancient times to the modern day, people have been drawn to what they cannot fully explain. The unknown sparks curiosity, fear, and imagination, offering stories that help us make sense of a world that often feels unpredictable and vast. Across cultures, ghosts appear in remarkably similar forms. In Japan, yurei linger between worlds, driven by unfinished business. In Europe, restless spirits haunt castles and crossroads. In many African and Latin American traditions, ancestral spirits remain close to the living, reminding us that death is not always seen as a clear ending. lakes and deep waters also generate mystery. Scotland's Loch Ness Monster has cousins around the world: Ogopogo in Canada, Nahuelito in Argentina, and ancient water spirits in African and indigenous American folklore. These lake dwellers reflect our unease with dark, hidden depths where vision fails and imagination takes over. Forests, too, have their creatures. The Bigfoot legend in North America echoes the Yeti of the Himalayas and the Yowie of Australia. These wild, half-human figures often live beyond civilization, symbolizing nature's resistance to being fully mapped, controlled, or understood by modern society. Not all mysteries are mythical. History is full of unresolved real-world cases. Jack the Ripper terrorized Victorian London and was never identified, while the ship Mary Celeste was found drifting at sea with no crew aboard and no clear explanation. These cases resist closure, keeping speculation alive for generations. Our fascination with myth and mystery may come from a shared discomfort with uncertainty. Whether supernatural or historical, these stories invite us to question what we think we know. They remind us that despite science and technology, some questions remain unanswered, and perhaps always will.
Thank you to our celebrity guest speaker for another fascinating monologue on myths and mysteries. And before we finish the topic of the week, here's an interesting object. In the past, when you bought a packet of tea, they used to have these collectible cards inside. And every year they would do a different series of animals or aeroplanes or something like that. And one year they did this series of unsolved mysteries. And here's an image here, which is an old photograph. And if you look at the back of the card, it says, "It is a fact that 19th century pioneers in Alaska regularly saw the image of a city in the sky which they believed was our city of Bristol, over 2,500 miles distant. The mirage appeared every summer on the Great Glacier of Mount Fairweather. The Alaskan Indians knew of this phantom city before the white settlers came, calling it the City in the Clouds." This photograph, published in 1887, purports to be that of the Bristol Mirage, taken by a famous pioneer named Willoughby. One historian identified the distinctive buildings, including the spire of St. Mary Redcliffe. There you go. That's a very interesting thing, isn't it? And also, while going through the archives at the back of my computer, I found this rather entertaining advert from a few years ago. Everybody's reading Round the Table, the official newsletter of the Meeting Point Bilbao. It's educational, entertaining, and in a bar near you. Also available in PDF and WhatsApp format. Call now for your copy. I thought you might appreciate that blast from the past. Now finally, for this episode and indeed for this year, we have a Christmas story for you. So sit back and relax and let this nice lady read you a story.
On Christmas Eve of 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, Germany's last major attempt to push back the advancing Allied armies. Fighting raged through the Ardennes forest on the border between Germany and Belgium. In a small hunting cabin deep in the woods, 12-year-old Fritz Winken and his mother Elizabeth were preparing a very modest Christmas dinner. They had been living in the cabin since October, after fleeing the city of Aachen, which had been heavily bombed by the Allies. Fritz's father, Hubert, was a baker in Aachen, but after the bombing, he had been conscripted into the civil defense in the nearby town of Monschau. To keep his family safe, Hubert sent his wife and son to stay in the hunting cabin, not realizing that the Battle of the Bulge would soon erupt all around them. Monschau was only about 4 miles away, so Elizabeth and Fritz hoped that Hubert might be able to come home for Christmas Eve. However, as the fighting intensified, this seemed increasingly unlikely. That evening, they were preparing a meal just for the two of them when there was a knock at the door. Fritz, thinking it was his father, ran towards the door. Elizabeth stopped him immediately. She knew that Hubert would never knock. She carefully opened the door just a little. Fritz, standing inside, heard men's voices, but they were speaking a language he did not recognize. Outside stood 3 American soldiers who had become separated from their unit and had been wandering through the forest for 3 days. 2 were standing at the door. The third was lying in the snow behind them, bleeding from a gunshot wound to his leg. Elizabeth saw immediately that they were very young, late teenagers, or perhaps in their early 20s. Without hesitation, she invited them inside. She did not speak English, and the soldiers did not speak German, but one of them spoke some French, as did Elizabeth, so they were able to communicate a little. She placed the wounded soldier on her bed and tore up her bedsheets to make bandages for his leg. Then she realized that the food they had planned would not be enough. She turned to Fritz and said, "Go and get Hermann, and bring 6 potatoes." Hermann was the rooster they had been fattening up, hoping that Hubert would come home so they could eat it together for Christmas. Soon, the cabin was filled with the smell of roast chicken and potatoes. Then there was another knock at the door. Fritz assumed it was more lost Americans and went to answer it. Instead, he found 4 German soldiers standing outside. Later, Fritz said, "I was almost paralyzed with fear. Even as a child, I knew the harsh law of war. Anyone who gave aid to the enemy could be shot." Elizabeth knew this too. She stepped outside and closed the door behind her. The German soldiers had also become separated from their unit that day and were looking for shelter for the night. Elizabeth thought quickly and said, "Yes, you may stay the night, and I will give you a warm meal, but there are 3 other guests inside, and you are not going to like them. If you enter, you must leave your weapons outside." The leader of the group, a 23-year-old German corporal, demanded to know who was inside. When he realized they were Americans, Elizabeth said, "Listen, you could be my sons, and so could they. A wounded boy fighting for his life, and 2 friends, lost, hungry, and exhausted, just like you. For this one night, this Christmas night, let us forget about killing." Before the corporal could object, she firmly ordered the men to place their weapons on the woodpile. She then went inside, collected the Americans' weapons, and placed them outside as well. Only then did she allow the German soldiers to enter. The tension inside the small cabin was intense. Elizabeth knew that hunger would only make things worse. One rooster was not enough to feed everyone, so she told Fritz to fetch more potatoes and oats. She decided to make a soup. When Fritz returned, he noticed that the tension had eased. One of the German soldiers, who had been a medical student before the war, was tending to the wounded American. Although only one soldier spoke some English, it became clear that the wounded man would survive if he could rest, eat, and drink. Elizabeth prepared the soup. The German corporal contributed a bottle of red wine, and another soldier shared some rye bread. That night, 8 people sat together at a small table, Americans and Germans, sharing a meal in the middle of the Battle of the Bulge. According to Fritz, they did not talk much. They did not share a common language. Instead, his mother began to cry, and soon several of the soldiers were crying quietly as they ate. Just before midnight, Elizabeth went outside and asked everyone to join her to look up at the Star of Bethlehem. All stood beside her, except the wounded soldier, who was sleeping. Fritz later wrote, "For that moment of silence, looking at the brightest star in the heavens, the war felt distant, almost forgotten." The next morning, Elizabeth rose early. She gave the wounded soldier broth from the soup and a mixture of wine, sugar, and egg as a tonic. She prepared oatmeal for the others, using one of her best tablecloths and 2 wooden poles. The men made a stretcher so the wounded soldier could be taken back toward American lines. The Americans, however, no longer knew where their unit was. While studying a map, they decided to head toward Monschau. The German corporal overheard this and warned them that the town had recently been retaken by German forces. Instead, he showed them a safer route and gave one of the Americans his compass. They then parted ways, returning to their respective sides of the war. For years, many people doubted Fritz's story. It seemed too sentimental to be true. In 1959, Fritz moved to Honolulu and opened a bakery, like his father. He shared the story in a local newspaper and later in Reader's Digest, but many remained skeptical. In 1995, Fritz told the story on the television program Unsolved Mysteries. After the broadcast, a chaplain at a nursing home in Maryland recognized the story. One of the residents, Ralph Blank, a former sergeant in the U.S., 121st Infantry Division, said, "I was there that night. It happened exactly as Fritz described." When asked for proof, he produced the compass the German soldier had given him. Shortly before both men died, Fritz and Ralph met in person. Fritz later wrote, "Now I can die in peace. My mother's courage will not be forgotten. She showed what goodwill can do. By her strength and intuition, she prevented bloodshed and taught me the true meaning of goodwill toward mankind." It was a small, fragile Christmas truce, shared over a bowl of chicken soup, in the middle of one of the bloodiest battles of the Second World War.
A wonderful, inspiring Christmas story, I think you'll agree. Let me know if you want any more stories like that in the future podcasts. So we're closing down for Christmas now. We'll be starting again on the Wednesday the 7th will be the first class. So if you start on a Wednesday, I'll see you on the 7th of January. 7th, 8th, 9th, and then the Monday will be the 12th. The Tuesday group will start on the 13th of January. The next podcast will probably be around about the middle of January. Probably the 18th, I imagine. So, I hope you all have a lovely holiday. Enjoy your travels if you're going away. We look forward to seeing you back again. don't drink too much, don't eat too much, and have a good Christmas. Till next year.